We also welcome questions anytime during the presentation. If you want to just submit those through the Q&A box, we've saved some time at the end. We're going to get through as many of those as possible. And now I'd love to turn it to our fantastic panelists who've joined us today. Each of you, I'm going to stop sharing. Each of you can introduce yourselves, what organization you're with, and where in the country you're joining us from. So I'll start with Leigh.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Leigh Phillips. I'm the CEO of SaverLife, and I am joining you today from Arlington, Virginia.
Great. Jenny, do you want to go next?
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Flores. I'm the head of Small Business Growth Philanthropy at Wells Fargo, and I am joining you from the San Francisco Bay Area.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Samir Goel. I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEOs at Esusu. We might not have the same name brand recognition, so we basically make sure that when renters pay rent on time, that data gets reported to the credit bureaus. They build credit, and when renters fall behind on rent, we pair them with zero interest financing to keep people in their homes. Dialing in from New York, New York.
Great. Thank you, guys. So before we jump into our conversation, I'm going to set the stage a little bit about the role that technology has been playing in our lives increasingly, and I'm going to share a few slides about this, and then we'll jump into the conversation. So one of the things that we have been seeing, and I'm sure most of you have been seeing, is that people are spending just more and more of their time on their mobile devices. In 2022, we found a survey that people are spending almost 5 hours every day on their phone. So really running their everyday lives through their phone now. And that's almost an hour jump just over the last 3 years. We're also seeing that this is not just younger adults, but it's actually older adults as well. Younger adults, like all the way up to 50, almost 97% of them own a phone, but even out of 50 to 64-year-olds, 83% of them own a phone. And 64 plus, it's 61%. So it is really just increasing more and more. And technology is playing just such a big role in our lives. Also wanted to highlight just how outreach and engagement is really evolving. So on the left, you'll see some traditional methods that maybe outreach has been done in the past, where maybe a nonprofit or an organization that's really trying to recruit people or recruit folks to an event are using some things like flyers or sending out emails, maybe doing direct mail even. A lot of work with partners, asking them to announce their newsletter or do community event calendars, and really leveraging word of mouth and your personal or the organization's network. On the right, you'll see where things are really evolving to. So people are used to finding out about things more online. And so that's what you're seeing more and more digital ads being used, Google or social media channels, partner referrals, but using more of a pay for performance model, influencers such as on TikTok or Instagram, and content syndication, which is your content on other people's sites. And using these digital methods really allows you to scale with not a ton of extra staff time, because you can, with a click, turn things off and on, increase your budget, see what's working. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later. The last sort of trend that we're seeing is that people really do want personalization, and they always have, really. But on the left side, you'll see what sort of personalization looked like, maybe even 20, 30 years ago. I know my dad, for example, goes in every Friday to see the same bank teller, pulls out money, probably the same amount every week, and they know each other. And so he's getting really that personalized advice from her. Versus on the right, you'll see what personalization looks like today, which is much more online, much more digital. This is an example from Bitmoji, where someone gets to choose what their hair looks like, what they're wearing, wanting personalized recommendations and their own journey, but in a digital format. So the problems that the social sector are really trying to solve are big problems, and they're really going to require big solutions, which is why, we at SaverLife are also doubling down on tech and really scaling those solutions. We're excited to announce that we just launched our mobile app with the support of the Wells Fargo Foundation. You can find that on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. I'm really excited to meet members where they're at. They're used to using mobile apps to run their daily lives, and we're excited to meet them there. So I will now stop sharing and we'll jump into a few questions for our panelists around technology. So our first question, and I'll pose this to Leigh to start us off, is we're all seeing technology obviously influence our work. Just want to hear about how you're seeing that in your organization. How are you using to scale your impact, more efficiently and more effectively?
Well, thanks, Neha, and thanks so much to Jenny and Samir for joining us. I've been really excited about today's conversation. So many of you on the call probably know me and you probably know this organization. And we haven't always been a fintech and advocacy organization called SaverLife. In fact, we were an IDA provider, a match savings organization for many years, and we were called Earn. And for the first 10 years, we were pretty successful at that before my time at the organization. But the real reason that we made this pivot towards technology is that we felt the need to stand up a scalable solution to a massive, massive problem that we have in this country, which is the pervasive, deeply entrenched financial insecurity that's affecting, depending on who you ask, half of the population, 2/3 of the population living paycheck to paycheck. And we were pretty successful in the asset building world, and we helped about 6,000 people in our first 10 years. We've now helped 600,000 people in the last 5 years, and that's because of this pivot towards technology. As Neha mentioned, we just launched a mobile app. That's a huge milestone for us to be in the App Store and in the Google Store. So that's really huge, and we can really continue to leverage the power of tech to serve our clients. We're going to talk today a lot about digital advertising. Like I'm sure many on the call, I've spent my fair amount of time over the years standing in the rain at community events and tables and getting people to sign up for things. But this is a much more exciting and accessible way to serve our clients, right? SaverLife clients have multiple jobs, they've got families, they're juggling a lot of things. To be able to access services from the privacy of your own phone is a much more convenient way for people to engage. The second thing I'll say briefly is really how we can then, tech allows us to center the needs of people with low incomes in our design and in our services in a way that we haven't been able to do before, right? We live in a financial system that is largely designed for higher wealth people. Technology is changing that, is transforming that, right? It's giving more market power to the communities that we care about. And so I'll just, wrap up by saying that one of the big reasons I took on this role, and it's not easy being a nonprofit fintech, I'll say that much, but it's exciting. But it's because of this fundamental question of who is going to get to shape the future, right? Financial technology is transforming this industry. It's everywhere. We can access so many different products and services. And if the only people at that table are the same people who built the old system, we're not going to meet the promise of being able to really drive forward on financial inclusion. So we have a big opportunity now, but it really depends on getting the right diversity of voices and getting those of us who represent vulnerable constituents and communities to make sure that their needs are being centered in this financial technology discussion. So I think we run the risk of just making a faster, more efficient version of the status quo, and we know that doesn't work for many, many Americans. And so that's why I'm really excited to hear from Samir and Jenny about how they're also leveraging tech to make sure that more people have the opportunity to participate in an equitable financial system.
Thank you, Leigh. That was great. Jenny or Samir, either one of you would like to jump in. Love to hear from you.
Yeah, happy to jump in here. I don't know if we were both struggling to reach the unmute button, so but thanks, Leigh, for that background and also just for having us participate in this webinar. It's a pleasure to speak with you all. You got to hear a little bit about what Esusu does, but I think what might be helpful to ground the conversation is a little bit about why we do the work that we do, and that'll dovetail nicely into the platform we've built and how technology enables us to reach people at scale and really have an outsized impact. For myself and my co-founder, Wamimo, Esusu really stemmed from our personal experiences. I grew up in an immigrant family from New Delhi, India. And when we moved to America, I think we thought we had made it. And unfortunately, that was just far from the truth. My father was actually mugged on his first day in the country. We didn't really have much for shelter. And a lot of my upbringing was really just watching how challenging it was for my parents to make ends meet without a credit score and with very limited financial resources not to mention the cultural acclimation elements of it. And so inspired by that and the experiences of my co-founder, Wamimo, who took out a 400% payday loan, we really founded Esusu on this core premise that no matter where you come from, the color of your skin or your financial identity, it shouldn't determine where you end up in life. And like Leigh said, we see technology as a way to kind of really shift that status quo. When we started Esusu, we actually started as a savings company and wanted to go individually to people one by one. And for lack of a better term, that was a hot mess. Imagine, hey, Neha, we just met. Can I have your social security number? Can I have your bank account details? And can you give me all this information about you, right? It's a very challenging thing to ask anyone. And so the only way we were literally onboarding new folks onto our platform was by going to churches and community centers and sharing our story and getting kind of buy-in the way you would organizing a political grassroots campaign. And so we realized we needed to do something a little bit different to reach people at scale. And that's what really led us to think about, well, how can we leverage other institutions and technology and data to reach people at scale and really help elevate? And at Esusu, we think of ourselves as a data company and a technology company. One thing I want to point out is our fundamental belief in the credit system is that it treats you as though you're guilty until proven innocent. And the way that we think that we can reshape that is, what are other data points and who is not being included currently that we can reach and then properly assess risk for so that they can participate in the same way that all of us on this webinar have the privilege to do so. A very basic example is rental payments. It's funny enough, but there's nothing more predictive of whether or not someone pays their mortgage as to whether or not they pay their rent. But we've never looked at rental data to underwrite a single mortgage in the history of this country. And that's a miss for everyone. But most importantly, it just leaves a lot of people out who don't need to be left out. And so I've talked quite a bit, but that is kind of a couple examples as to how we think about using both data and technology to sort of shift the status quo and create a credit and financial system that works for everyone.
Great, thank you, Samir. Jenny, I would love to hear from you as well.
Yes, yeah, I was struggling with my mute button there, so I'm glad I'm on. I'll just start off by saying thank you to Leigh. I have had the privilege of working with Leigh for, I don't know, almost 20 years. And in that time, really looking to push these models forward in ways that leave lasting impact. And I'll say, Samir, it's a pleasure to be on with you as well. I've only heard the best things about your leadership and the impact that you are making. So it's really, really a privilege. So I wanted to talk about not the point of view of Wells Fargo in the sense of how we're leveraging technology, but more about what we are seeing as funders of technology in the social impact space. And so in that vein, during COVID, it was very clear as my team and I were getting ready to make investments and trying to deploy capital to small businesses who were hanging by a thread, literally had maybe 15 days of cash on hand. And they were saying, like, we just need cash to survive. We were putting about $20 million of capital on the street every month, like just getting it out there. And it became very clear that the nonprofits who had access to technology could deploy that capital really quickly. They had a pulse on where their clients were. They knew what to do to get either the loan restructured or a grant or a new loan out. And then there were others who were struggling. Like, we want to do this, we gave the money, and then we check 90 days later, maybe one loan. It was just like so shocking, the speed at which organizations were able to move. So we made a concerted effort to just start investing as part of grants in technology. And so one of the things that we did is invest in underwriting platforms to get decisions made quicker. And we saw that it was taking 3 to 4 weeks on average to get a decision on a loan. And that got reduced down to 1 to 2 days, which increased the deployment ratio exponentially. And so we just felt really good about being able to put that capital to work almost immediately as we were deploying it into communities. The second thing that became apparent was that customers needed a way to engage post-loan, right? And so we are investing in creating kind of customer servicing and loan servicing apps for organizations that need to stay in touch with their customers. And the old way wasn't working. Like, there was no open, offices. So how do people then engage, right? Like, email was really clunky. And so we are seeing that by building these apps with our collaborators in the social sector, not only Are they able to provide real-time services that are needed, but they're able to understand the customer pain points much more quickly and be able to solve for that. And on the customer side, it's a much more efficient process. They know exactly what to do and how to get the services they need. And so we're just seeing a lot of that friction in the system starting to get addressed because we're investing in technology. And then we ourselves invested in connecting up our Wells Fargo ecosystem into the social sector. So as an example, we worked with the Community Reinvestment Fund to connect the declines that we get at Wells Fargo on small business now go automatically into the CRF platform, and we are able to match our small business customers who got declined with a CDFI who could better serve them based on the criteria that the customer has, and the nonprofit can underwrite that. So we can understand now how to better take a situation that could be negative, like a decline, and make it a positive by being able to match our customers with resources that are better positioned to help them. So I just feel like technology can enable impact both at scale, but also much more efficiently for everybody, so that we're focusing our resources not on all the pain points all the time, but on really making it a positive experience and getting the solutions that are needed to people really quickly.
That's awesome. That sounds some great examples, both Samir and Jenny. I wanted to ask the flip side of this, which is there are lots of exciting things that technology is obviously bringing to the social sector. Is there anything that concerns you about the use of technology in the social sector? Anything you're kind of keeping your eye on that, you know, obviously with technology comes great stuff, but also maybe some issues. So wanted to see what you guys thought. Maybe Jenny, we'll start with you. Go with you first.
Sure. So as part of the work that we did with Leigh, we were looking at a lot like gig workers, people who in the very first phase of the work that we supported, I recall that we were doing $500 saving boosts for micro entrepreneurs, maybe people who had side hustles that needed that support during the height of the pandemic. And one of the things that came on my radar that's concerning, and I actually don't know how to address it immediately, but it's the fact that a lot of the AI that's built into, for example, the apps that Uber drivers use can actually start to pick up so much information on the person that it starts to, at least this is the theory, it starts to figure out like this person will do the job for $50. So we know what kind of opportunities they'll take. And so it starts to almost put limits on the ability for them to go take jobs that are going to pay them more, because the system already knows, like it can actually predict this person will do this work for this amount, and it almost starts to cap the ability for them to do better. And so I'm like, if this is happening, is it happening in other areas? Like to the point Leigh made in the beginning, like, are we building models to maximize profit for certain segments at the risk of limiting the growth potential of people who are underserved, who oftentimes, you know, fortunes are made on their backs? So how do we ensure that technology is used to unlock potential versus cap? Whether it's in underwriting, whether it's in how these workers are sent opportunities their way, whether it's in the ability for us to fund new innovation, like who decides that? And how is this being monitored and made sure that it's equitable? It's really concerning to me. And so, like I said, I don't have an answer, but I am definitely keeping my eye on what is happening in this space, because what large industries do tends to set the model, and we need to get in there quickly to make sure that that model isn't what becomes standard business practice.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Thank you, Jenny. Samir, I'll turn to you to see if you have any concerns about technology.
Yeah, thanks so much, Neha. And Jenny, really also just helpful to hear your insights on this matter as well. I would say I tend to be cautiously optimistic about the potential of technology. I think the reason why I'm bullish about technology is because I don't think the status quo works today, right? And so where we are is in a country where 50 to 70% of people live paycheck to paycheck. 45 million people don't have a credit score. 70 million people are credit thin or don't have credit. And it's super extractive system, my co-founder and I have coined a term that we like to call justice capitalism. So how do you kind of take capitalism and sort of layer in a little bit of justice? All that to say that I think technology is a force for good that can shift a system that doesn't work today. And so that's one piece of it. That being said, I think what's lacking and what's always lacked is intentionality. And so that is where I think we need to be very thoughtful as we're building companies, as we're instituting new policies, as we're grappling with the understanding of technology, who's at that table? What is the right time to incorporate regulation and oversight? In an adjacent industry of social media, it's not necessarily fintech, but Facebook went from being a fast-growing startup to becoming essentially a public utility, and regulators don't know how to handle it, right? And now we're playing catch up. And so how do we sort of think about some of these things, understanding that over time they will become dominant players in our society, and make sure that we're kind of building the right regulatory frameworks at the right time. So we're not necessarily stopping innovation and change because we need innovation and change because our status quo doesn't work, but at the same time, not waiting too long to the point where everyone is dependent on new sort of systems and processes and technology, and we don't have the kind of tools and infrastructure to sort of create oversight and regulation in the way that we need to. And so that's really what I think about it. It's all about making sure you have the right guardrails, the right group of stakeholders at the table, a diverse audience at the table. And so as technology scales and sort of shifts systems as we know them today, we're also putting in place the right guardrails. I'd also say that can go poorly because, if I think about credit as an area of expertise that we have, a lot of the reason why the FICO score became so ubiquitous is because it was required by government for mortgage applications, right? And so government doesn't necessarily always have the right answers, but I think we need all stakeholders at the table. That's why I have so much admiration for Leigh and SaverLife as a fintech nonprofit. And that sort of value system that's being brought to the table alongside for-profit entities, alongside sort of institutional funders, government advocates, and all of that is how you really can make change for good. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Samir. Great, Leigh, let's end with you.
Well, I'll wrap up hopefully on a hopeful note, because as Jenny and Samir point out, things are happening fast, and faster than we can somewhat keep up with, right? And what does that mean, right? How do we embed that intentionality that Samir is talking about? How do we harness the power of innovation to do good, to have better models, to give more market power to people who really haven't had that for too many years? Like, it's important to note the current system doesn't work very well either, right? So the current system we have doesn't work very well. We have this opportunity to create something new, but if we don't do that with a sense of shared purpose and with this goal in mind of a more equitable financial system in which everyone has opportunity to build wealth, we're not going to get there. So we've got to think really about, how do we measure this, right? How do we know if we're succeeding or not? And so, it's going to be really hard, as Samir and Jenny point out, to regulate or to keep an eye on new products and services based on the product features and everything that's coming at us. So I'm going to oversimplify this, and I'm going to put a very simple message out there, which is, are the products, are the features, are the services making people financially healthier or not, right? And if we can look at things from that lens, does this product, does this innovation make Americans, and particularly Americans with low incomes, better off or worse off? And if we can start seeing things through that oversimplified lens, I think we'll have a better chance at kind of an outcomes-based framework of how we're going to really look at and evaluate the products on the market today, and understand if they're really contributing to the future that I think we all want to see and need to see, which is, closing the racial and gender-based wealth gaps and making sure that everyone does have that opportunity to succeed. But we're not going to get there if we don't start there, right? That we have to think about that as the end goal, and then we've got to be all in, right? We've got to be all in on being a part of shaping this future, of bringing our best thoughts, our research, our data, our ideas, and advocating for the world that we want to see. And I'm very grateful to, Samir is a member of our board, Jenny is a former member of our board, for being on this journey with us.